What if I told you that we now live in a world where stupidity isn't just accepted, it's rewarded, where being loud, empty, and proudly clueless is a shortcut to attention, influence, and even leadership? Look around. The ones getting the spotlight aren't always the wisest or most thoughtful. They're the most dramatic, the most exaggerated, the most easily consumed. Deep thinking, that rarely trends. Nuance, it doesn't go viral. What spreads like wildfire are the things that are easiest to swallow, that demand the least of us. We're in an age where the most meaningless personalities are the most celebrated. A short, shallow clip gets more reach than a rich, thought-provoking conversation. A joke outperforms a real insight. Fast content wins because it's easy. And in this system, ease is everything. This isn't just a cultural moment, it's a complete rewiring of how we process the world. We've created a system where shallow wins every time, where memes stand in for arguments, where reactions replace reasoning, and where dopamine hits replace actual engagement with reality. There was a time when public conversations were grounded in thought, debate, and even disagreement. It was expected. It was healthy. Today, the landscape looks different. Public dialogue has turned into a shouting match. There's no room to wrestle with ideas anymore. It's just who can get the quickest reaction, the biggest click, the loudest laugh. We've stopped rewarding thoughtful pauses and started rewarding flashy distractions. And this change didn't happen by mistake. It's the result of how our media works now. The influencers we elevate, the content we click, the platforms we give our time to, they all send a message. It's better to be likable than to be accurate. It's faster to be dramatic than to be thoughtful. It's easier to be shallow than to be real. The truth, it doesn't pay. Attention does. And attention doesn't care if you're right. It just wants to know how long you can hold someone's eyes on a screen. So, we've become a culture trained not to think, but to react. Not to analyze, but to scroll. Over time, this does something dangerous to our values. What we find interesting changes. What we respect shifts. And before we know it, we're taking advice from clowns and ignoring people who've spent their lives understanding complex truths. And if you think it's just harmless fun, just content, it's not. Because when being uninformed becomes profitable, more people will choose to be uninformed. It becomes strategic. Creators start faking ignorance to seem more relatable. Politicians talk in one-liners instead of actual policy. News is now entertainment. Thumbnails scream with shock. Posts blow up not because they're true, but because they trigger a reaction. The performance of stupidity isn't a joke anymore. It's a formula, a business model, and every time we reward it, we make it stronger. So, when did we start confusing noise with wisdom? When did being seen become more important than having something to say? It's disturbing, but it's the world we're in now. The system doesn't just tolerate stupidity. It amplifies it, it packages it, it monetizes it. And slowly, that shapes how we think, what we believe, and who we trust. It turns thinking itself into a threat. Even worse, ignorance is no longer a weakness, it's a strategy. The rise of the clueless influencer, the "I don't know, I'm just being real" persona, isn't accidental. It's curated, it's polished. It's designed to appear relatable and harmless, while raking in attention, money, and influence. That fake dumb energy, it's profitable. And in this economy of attention, being thoughtful isn't just uncool, it's inconvenient. Just look around. The people with the biggest reach aren't necessarily saying anything worth hearing. They're just louder, more extreme, more chaotic. And the sad part? That works. Outrage works, drama works, noise works. Meanwhile, authenticity, real, thoughtful, human depth, gets buried. Why? Because it takes time, because it demands presence. And in the age of the scroll, time and presence are rare. We've built a system where it's smart to act stupid, where millions imitate that behavior because it works. That leads to something darker, anti-intellectualism. And it's everywhere now. People start distrusting experts, mocking scientists, ignoring thinkers, because they're too serious, too complicated, or worse, too boring. We've made depth into something awkward, and ignorance into something cool. Platforms reward content that hits fast, loud, and shallow. That's what spreads. That's what gets you hooked. And so it grows. A sarcastic reel goes viral, but a deep explanation is ignored. A fake story gets more shares than a real study. Why? Because lies are easier. Because truth is work. And work doesn't go viral, but outrage does, humor does, distraction does. The system we're in doesn't just allow stupidity, it depends on it, because stupidity spreads faster, it sells better, it's easier to digest, and people, especially young people, are watching. They're learning what works, what gets you attention, what makes you successful. And increasingly, it's not intelligence, it's visibility. And the more you perform for it, the more it performs for you. So, ask yourself this. What happens when an entire culture starts to reward ignorance over insight? When being clever is seen as elitist and being thoughtful is seen as boring, you create a generation trained to reject the very things that could actually make them powerful. You get a world where complexity is avoided, where questions are uncomfortable, and where depth feels like a burden instead of a gift. And we wonder why everything feels so shallow now, why conversations are surface level, why content feels empty, why even our relationships feel like performances. This didn't just happen, it was built, it was engineered. The systems we use, the apps, the platforms, the media, they're designed to keep us in that cycle, to keep us reactive, not reflective, to keep us consuming, not thinking. Because when you're tired, when you're overwhelmed, when you're emotionally triggered, you're easier to control, and you're more profitable. The more time you spend in a state of emotional response, the more you scroll, the more you click, the more ads you see. So, the system feeds you the easiest content possible, the most extreme opinions, the simplest takes, not to inform you, but to own your attention. And in this ecosystem, stupidity isn't just a side effect, it's the product. The entire machine is built to produce and reward it, from influencer drama to political slogans to viral challenges that offer nothing but noise. This is what sells, not wisdom, not growth, not truth. Because those things take time. They take silence. They take mental space. And those are the very things the system strips away from you every single day. Even news, which should be about truth, has become about drama. Speed matters more than accuracy. Shock matters more than nuance. And politics? It's performance now. The more dramatic, the more votes. The more outrageous, the more airtime. It's no longer about solving problems. It's about selling personalities. We're not electing leaders anymore. We're promoting content creators in suits. So, before you blame yourself for feeling tired, lost, distracted, it's not just you, it's the system. A system that knows exactly how to play on your instincts, your fears, your boredom, your craving for escape. The glorification of stupidity didn't start in a vacuum. It's been carefully packaged, polished, and sold to you in the form of short-form dopamine hits. And the deeper you look, the more clear it becomes. This is no accident. This is design. And what's the cost of all this? It's not just your time. It's your ability to think. It's your ability to stay still, to sit with a question, to wrestle with an idea without immediately jumping to a reaction. That skill, the ability to think deeply, is fading, slowly, quietly, almost without anyone noticing. Because when everything's always moving, always shouting, always flashing, it becomes harder and harder to listen to the part of you that wants to slow down. And that's how a culture loses its compass. Not all at once, not in a sudden collapse, but little by little. One click at a time, one shallow post at a time, one decision to avoid discomfort at a time. And before you know it, the people making decisions can't think clearly. The people following them don't know what to believe. And the institutions meant to guide us have no more depth, no more weight, no more trust. And this isn't just about media or education. It's personal. It's in the way we talk, the way we share, the way we choose who to follow, who to ignore, what to celebrate. Think about it. When was the last time you heard someone say something truly thoughtful and it went viral? Probably rare. But start an argument, spark some outrage, throw in some humor and exaggeration, and it spreads like wildfire. And that shapes what we value, slowly but surely. The ones who ask hard questions disappear into the background. The ones who entertain, who distract, who oversimplify rise to the top. That's the world young people are growing up in. where depth isn't just ignored, it's punished, where curiosity is uncool, where the appearance of knowledge matters more than knowledge itself. So, what do you think that does to a generation? It teaches them to play along, to avoid asking too much, to stay on the surface, to be funny instead of real, entertaining instead of honest, shiny instead of true. And many of them start hiding their intelligence, not because they're ashamed of it, but because they don't want to stand out in the wrong way. Because the moment you start asking deeper questions, you risk being called weird, boring, or trying too hard. Even schools are caught in this shift. Teachers are overwhelmed, undervalued, and silenced. Subjects that develop thought, philosophy, ethics, literature, history, are being cut or seen as useless. But they were never useless. They were the core of what it meant to understand yourself and the world. Without them, we produce workers, not thinkers, consumers, not citizens. And then we're surprised when people don't know how to handle conflict, nuance, or the complexity of life. And while all this happens, the spotlight stays on those who shout the loudest. Not the ones with wisdom, not the ones with insight, just the ones who know how to keep your eyes glued to the screen. But here's what's even more dangerous. This constant stream of shallow content doesn't just influence how we think. It changes who we become. It rewires the brain, because what you feed your mind daily becomes your lens, your filter. You begin to crave the easy stuff. You start rejecting anything that feels too heavy, too long, too deep. And eventually, anything that requires thought starts to feel like friction. Something to avoid. Something unpleasant. So, you don't read the long article. You skip the quiet conversation. You don't watch the documentary. You scroll to the next viral sound. And biologically, it makes sense. Every swipe, every like, every flashy notification gives your brain a tiny hit of dopamine. It feels good. It keeps you coming back. It's fast. It's addictive. Like junk food for the mind. And just like junk food, the more you consume it, the harder it is to go back to real nourishment. A well-written essay starts to feel like a chore. A slow, thoughtful interview feels boring. Even sitting alone with your thoughts becomes uncomfortable. And the algorithm? It knows. It's not feeding you what's good. It's feeding you what's sticky, what keeps you hooked. And truth, depth, complexity, that stuff doesn't stick as easily. It doesn't hit as fast. So the algorithm buries it. Not because it's not valuable, but because it's not viral. So, here we are. A culture seduced by simplicity, addicted to ease, trained to fear thinking. And most people don't even realize it, because they're moving too fast to notice what they're becoming. But something else is happening beneath the noise. Something slower, quieter. A kind of rebellion, but not the loud kind. It's not viral, it's not trending, but it's there. A quiet movement is growing, a resistance against the flood of shallowness. It's not built on outrage, it's built on intention. You see it in people practicing digital minimalism, choosing to unplug, to delete apps, to step back from the noise. You see it in those who read long-form books again, who journal, who meditate, who seek stillness not for the sake of productivity, but because they're tired of being hijacked by everything artificial. They're not trying to win the algorithm. They're trying to reclaim their minds, and they're not alone. Podcasts without flashy editing, filled with calm, honest, even awkward silence, are drawing millions of listeners. People are rediscovering what it means to listen. To real conversations, to real disagreements, to ideas that unfold slowly. And it's catching on, because somewhere deep down, we're still hungry for meaning, for depth, for substance. Even if the system doesn't reward it, our soul still craves it. Education is also quietly shifting. While big institutions chase profit and popularity, smaller programs are rebuilding the core, teaching philosophy, ethics, critical thinking. They are bringing back the ancient thinkers not for nostalgia, but because they still matter. Not everything timeless needs to be marketable. Some things are valuable because they ground us, because they remind us how to be human again. Even the self-help world is evolving. Sure, the surface is still filled with dopamine hacks and quick wins. But beneath that noise, something deeper is forming. People are journaling again, practicing stoicism, reading old texts, asking better questions, not just how do I get more, but why do I need more? Not how can I win, but what does winning even mean? These aren't revolutions with billboards or out on trending hashtags. They're revolutions of the mind. They're quiet, they're personal, but they matter. Because change doesn't always start big. Sometimes it starts with one person asking, what am I feeding my brain every day? One person saying, I don't want to live like this anymore. And from there, something real begins. You start choosing silence over noise, reflection over reaction, thoughtfulness over performance. You start valuing conversations that don't fit into a tweet. You start respecting people who say, I don't know, more than those who pretend they always do. And slowly, your world shifts. You don't have to fight the whole system. You don't have to outshout it. You just have to live differently within it. That's where your power is. It starts with your habits, what you watch, what you share, what you pay attention to. Read longer, watch slower, think harder. Share something not because it gets likes, but because it deserves to be heard. You'll feel the difference immediately. Then, find others. Build community. Talk to people who care about meaning, not just memes. Surround yourself with people who don't avoid hard questions, who don't need to be entertained all the time. Because those are the people who will challenge you, sharpen you, grow you. And they're out there. They're just usually not shouting. And lastly, stop pretending. Don't act dumber to fit in. Don't shrink your mind so others feel comfortable. Don't perform ignorance just to survive the noise. Because the longer you fake it, the more you start forgetting who you really are. This world doesn't need more fake confidence. It needs real awareness, real courage, real thinkers. People willing to question the surface and dig deeper, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's lonely. You don't need to wage war on stupidity. You just need to stop feeding it. You don't need to change everyone. Just start with yourself. Because every time you choose depth over distraction, you tilt the balance. Every time you ask, is this true? Before clicking share, you push the world 1 inch closer to clarity. Culture doesn't shift through noise. It shifts through example. And it only takes a few steady lights to remind the rest of the world what real thinking feels like. So, be that light. Live with intention, stay awake, think deeper, question harder. And don't ever let the world convince you that intelligence, honesty, or depth are weaknesses. Because they're not. They're your quiet superpowers in a world built on noise. And if enough of us start using them, shallow won't be the only thing that wins anymore.